2024, and it is 2 p.m. So welcome, everyone. We're going to go ahead and kick off today's meeting with some introductions. So in no particular order, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of see who's in attendance in the meeting this afternoon, and I'll call on you one by one. And if you could go ahead and state your name, your organization, and perhaps just a brief description of how your organization serves, that would be great. And of course, a little bit of your role as appropriate. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and call on Shaylin Turney. Go ahead, Shaylin. Welcome.
Hi. My name is Shaylin, and I am with an agency called Project Amore, and we work with children with special needs, and we transport from schools and community outings and things like that. And we also run after-school programs, and we also work with the Department of Child Safety and the Pima County Superior Court with families and children.
Great. Thank you, Shaylin. I appreciate it. And then I'm going to go ahead and call on Jessica Winchester. Hi, Jessica. Good afternoon. If you could go ahead and introduce yourself and anyone else from your organization that's attending, that'd be great as well. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Jessica Winchester, and I work with Catholic Community Services of Southern Arizona. I'm the Program Administrator and Director for the Vocational Services Department in Arizona. And I do have an individual who'll be joining us, I think fairly shortly. He should be joining us, and his name is Jose Vasquez. He's the Director and agency director over the deaf services in Arizona for our CCS organization. So if you see him joining in a little bit, that's who he is.
Great. All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. I'm going to go ahead and call on Tony. Good afternoon, Tony.
Good afternoon. I'm Tony Bruno, and I work in Southern Pima County and Northern Santa Cruz County with Valley Assistance Services. We provide transportation for seniors for non-medical emergencies, traveling them to Tucson, basically from communities like Arivaca, Amado, Green Valley, and Sahuarita, as well as we do some work on social isolation. So we do take our seniors to outside lessons and educational opportunities.
Great. Thank you, Tony. I appreciate that. I see Lisa Reams.
Good afternoon. Lisa Reams with Pima Council on Aging. I serve as the Vice President for Programs and Services, and Pima Council on Aging is the designated area agency on aging for all of Pima County, providing a number of in-home supports and nutrition and other services to help vulnerable older adults.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate it. And then Tom McKinney.
Hi, Tom McKinney. I can't find my screen, so I don't know if you can see me or not, but I'm the CEO of Interfaith Community Services, and we provide a variety of services to older adults or people facing eviction, people that are food deprived. We have workforce development and a variety of services that help people get out of poverty. So thanks for having me today.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it, Tom. I see Chris McNamara.
Hi, this is Chris McNamara. I'm with Beacon Group, the Vice President of Rehabilitation Services. I'm battling a cold, so I don't have my camera on. But we provide and create opportunities for people with disabilities. And most of that is around employment through finding jobs, maintaining jobs, and building skills to help people get employment.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. Good afternoon. Bonnie, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. Bonnie Bazada. I'm with Primavera Foundation, and I work on issues related to poverty, and particularly Primavera focuses very much on homelessness and housing along the continuum, also workforce development, financial capability, home ownership. So I've really enjoyed the calls and the opportunity to give input on this important area. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Bonnie. And then I see Dan Sullivan.
Hi, this is Kathy Lundeen. I'm filling in for Dan Sullivan today, but I'm with Community and Workforce Development with Pima County.
Great, thank you. Kathy, could you just state your last name one more time? I apologize, I missed that.
Sure, it's Lundeen, Lundin. Nice to
Great,
see a
thank
lot
you.
of familiar faces.
Great, thank you so much. I appreciate that. All right, let's see. I'm gonna make sure I'm not missing anyone here. I see Lisa Florin.
Yes, I'm here. Am I supposed to say more than that?
Sorry about that. Yeah, if you want to go ahead and just introduce the organization that you represent and perhaps a little bit about how your organization serves in the region, that would be great.
Sure. So yes, thank you for the overview and a reminder since I came in a little bit late. I'm Lisa Florin. She, her, I'm with United Way of Tucson in Southern Arizona. I work with our financial wellness and housing stability areas, but our organization as a whole is a key convener, advocate, and program provider for those areas, but also older adult services and education.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate it. All right, I see Jose Vasquez.
Yes, hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jose Vasquez, and I am the director for Community Outreach Program for the Deaf / Valley Center for the Deaf. And I oversee case management services, counseling, the SSP program. I work with Jessica Winchester, and I'm really happy to be involved in this meeting today.
Thank you, Jose. I appreciate you being here. It's great to see you. Let's see. I'm going to make sure I'm not missing anyone. I know some people have just joined us, so I'll make sure I'm respectful to that. All right, I think that's everyone, if I'm not mistaken. All right, if anyone else joins us along the way, I'll do my best to make sure we kind of take a moment and allow them to introduce themselves, etc. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move forward with the next item on the agenda, which is the in-kind form. And so as a reminder, regional planning efforts are enhanced by recording time donated by attendees, volunteers, and participants. PAG collects data on the time dedicated to meetings and activities to apply for use as matching funds for grants and federal dollars. And so if you are paid with federal dollars, we ask that you please let us know now, either through the hand prompt that's at the bottom of your screen, or feel free to send me an email just reminding me that is how you are paid. So therefore, we don't account for it in our in-kind. And I see Lisa Reams. So thank you, Lisa. All right. So time spent in preparation for this meeting will be estimated by PAG staff who are knowledgeable of the agenda and meeting materials. And at the conclusion of this meeting, the session report will automatically calculate your time spent in this meeting. Time spent working on PAG or RTA initiatives, programs, and special projects may also be eligible for consideration for matching funds. Just going to make sure I didn't miss anyone else with regard to who we should not count in our in-kind calculations. Right, I don't see any other hands up for acknowledging that you're paid with federal dollars.
I'm up there, Janine.
Okay, thank you, Tony. I appreciate that. Right. Thank you so much. All right, so after concluding the in-kind form part of the agenda, we're going to go ahead and move to the next item. And so much like on our last meeting, individuals who had either submitted a fact sheet and wanted to just speak to it, or they wanted to give some kind of more formal presentation pertinent to the items that are on the fact sheet, we are allowing for that opportunity again today based on the email that was sent out in preparation for that. So we're going to go ahead and allow that process to start. And so I know there was a couple organizations that had shared that they wanted to do a presentation, and if I'm not mistaken, it was Catholic Community Services and the Beacon Group, if I'm not mistaken. If there's any other organizations that are on the meeting or in the meeting today that are also prepared to present either a presentation or just an overview of their fact sheet, that would be fine. And you could go ahead and let me know at this time. So I'm going to go ahead and call on Chris McNamara from Beacon Group. We're just going to go in alphabetical order just because it's easier for my brain to remember who went first. How about that? So we're going to start with Chris McNamara from Beacon Group. So we're going to allow the ability to for you to share your screen if you actually have formal slides, Chris. If you don't, then go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I do have some slides, so if I can share my screen, I'd be
All
happy
right.
to share those.
So I'm going to let my IT team handle that and allow for you to be able to share your screen. So I'm going to let them go ahead and do that at this time. So if my IT team could go ahead and allow for Chris McNamara to be able to share his screen, that'd be great.
Yep, he has control. He can share his screen.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Let's see, screen. It says here when I click share screen, it's telling me
Isa,
disable share.
you just have to stop sharing the slides first, and then he should be good to go. There you go.
Okay.
I think we're all set. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, can everyone see this?
I can on my end. I don't know. Can anyone else see it?
Yes.
It's on the call right now. Okay, perfect. All right, Chris, looks like we're in.
All right, great. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to present here. Just a quick recap of the area that I'm presenting on here under employment services, with the target group, the plan funding level, and then the service intent. So pretty text heavy, but something that we all received prior to previous meetings. So yeah, you can take a look there at the service intent. The first few slides here are going to be a little text heavy. And I'm trying to click to the next slide, and it is not cooperating. Interesting. I can click backwards, but I can't click forwards.
So it looks like you're sharing the wrong screen with us. We're seeing your preview. So if you want to stop sharing and share again, that might help. Do you have two screens there on your computer or just one? So go ahead and go back into your slideshow from the current slide.
And while Chris is manipulating his slides and getting that in order, I'm just going to go ahead and do a quick reminder regarding presentations. So for those that are giving presentations or any kind of overview of their fact sheets, when doing so, it should not advocate for any one target group, and you should only present facts or data regarding demographics and needs and offer a regional perspective. And of course, as a reminder for the whole committee, this committee will discuss local issues and trends to determine the local priorities, and it will make funding recommendations for service categories, not agencies, and it does not review applications, reports, or have input into the state process once the plan is approved. So just wanted to go ahead and allow for that reminder. I was going to put it in a few minutes, but since we're kind of navigating some slides at the moment, I thought we'd just go ahead and put that in at this time. So Chris, if you're ready, I'll let you go ahead and restart, so to speak. So.
All right. Well, thank you. Yeah. So can you see, does it look correct now for everyone? Like just the full screen slide?
Yes, it looks like a full screen on my end. I'll let others share what they see.
Yes.
Yep. Okay. So then moving on, a little bit more background and information. The most recent Social Services Block Grant fiscal year 2022 annual report from the Administration of Children and Families put employment services in the area of self-sufficiency And self-sufficiency definition there, again, is very similar to what we saw on the previous slide. And then on it goes. Here in the Arizona Title 20 Social Services Block Grant Draft Plan, dated April of 2024. Again, a lot of the same things that we see from the previous two slides around the definition behind employment services. So what does that mean for us? Well, let's talk a little bit about the needs overview. So we'll talk about the industries and jobs. And so looking at the Pima County WIB sectors, sector strategy, which accessed earlier this week, these are the industry sectors looking at employment opportunities going forward. So we can see we're looking for aerospace and defense, emerging technologies, natural and renewable resources, logistics, health science, and infrastructure. And when we look at employment projections long-term, and this is from the Arizona Office of Economic Opportunity, that there's the column, the second to last column there, annual employment numeric change. You can see the number of jobs projected per year in Pima County over the period of 2023 to 2033. So again, it aligns very similarly to the previous slide, of course, as far as the industry sector. This gets into that with a little more detail on the kinds of jobs that we're seeing more growth and will have more need in. So as far as the looking at the form that we had, as far as any changes, I didn't put anything in for like service changes, needs changes, or funding changes. But then some additional insights or concerns. There are many agencies and organizations in Pima County that contribute to addressing and improving employment outcomes. The barriers to employment include, but are certainly not limited to, homelessness, childcare, transportation, disability, criminal background, and the lack of necessary education, training, or skills. Also, we have an aging workforce. So right now, data shows that we have 8 million job openings in the US, but only 6.8 million unemployed workers. Of course, I think, those of us on this call probably, recognize the difference between the unemployment number and the number of people that are underemployed or need and want work, but just are no longer included in those unemployment numbers. But nonetheless, still just to share that data with you, and then recognizing the aging workforce may create some further gaps in needs and employment going forward. So some of the general themes from this presentation is to work to align training with good jobs, working on overcoming barriers to employment, and then obtaining that employment, and then working to maintain employment. Those are some of the themes that come through around our area here in employment. And then I've included just a few links of where I gathered information for this brief presentation, and then also hyperlinked in some of the reports that I referenced as well. So I think that takes us through the brief presentation that I had, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Chris. I'm just going to go ahead and extend that opportunity. If anyone has any questions for Chris pertinent to his presentation, feel free to either go ahead and ask or raise your hand, so to speak, through the prompt on the platform that we're using right now. All right, let me see. Well, Chris, looks like you were really thorough. We don't have any questions.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for the opportunity.
All right, thank you, Chris. Appreciate it. All right, Jessica Winchester, are you going to present, or is Jose going to present?
Jose and I did work on this presentation together, but we decided that I'll be the presenter today, and then he'll be joining me for any follow-up questions. But he's here, and we've equally contributed to this. Just want to make sure I represent him today. But just for ease of presentation, I'm going to go ahead and present.
Okay, sounds good. So did you have slides that you wanted to share?
Yes, I do.
Right, I'm going to go ahead and ask my IT team to go ahead and give you those permissions if you don't already have them.
You can go ahead, Jessica.
Okay, perfect. I'm gonna click on hopefully the right screen, and if not, I'll adjust here. I know it does that weird thing. Okay, 1 second. Are you guys seeing the right screen? I gotta ask first.
It says Rehabilitation Services Administration Regional Needs Fact Sheet. I think that's
Yep.
Your
Is
first
it the
screen.
full? Is it the full screen though? It's not.
It
Yes.
is.
Okay,
It is.
perfect. Okay. Excellent. Excellent. So, the fact sheet that we're addressing today is the RSA regional needs as it pertains to assisting deaf individuals in accessing and utilizing services, including emergency services and providing interpreting services, assisting deaf and hard of hearing clients in solving and or learning to cope with their disability by providing intervention, support, and counseling. And I did change one word on there just because it's a better word. You know, deaf or hard of hearing instead of hearing impaired is something that we use today. All right. So in Arizona, over 1.1 million people live with some form of hearing loss, including deafness, hard of hearing, and deafblind individuals. The Arizona Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, or the ACDHH, estimates that this represents about 18% of the state's population, reflecting a substantial need for specialized services and support. This includes various services like access to assistive technologies, interpreter services, and specialized education resources. In Pima County, there is a significant need to provide intervention support and counseling services tailored to the unique challenges faced by deaf and hard of hearing individuals. Communication barriers can lead to isolation, difficulties in accessing essential services, and challenges in securing meaningful employment. The region's existing resources for this population are limited, making it crucial to address gaps in services accessibility and support tailored to the deaf and hard of hearing community. The primary goals of these services are enhancing coping mechanisms, assisting clients in learning effective ways to manage the social and psychological impacts of their hearing disabilities. This may include one-to-one counseling, peer support groups, educational programs aimed at fostering self-advocacy and independence. Also, to promote employment opportunities through support and skill building, helping individuals prepare for and access job opportunities that accommodate their needs. Services might include job coaching, workplace advocacy, and communication assistance in interviews and employment settings. Another is improve access to resources, bridging those gaps in assessing community and health resources by providing information, advocacy, and support services. This includes ensuring that clients have access to interpreters, mental health services, and social service programs adapted to their communication needs. Another is enhancing quality of life, addressing isolation by fostering community connections and access to recreational, cultural, and social opportunities, all while making sure and enhancing understanding and acceptance within that broader community. In Pima County, there is a significant demand for services addressing the unique challenges faced by deaf and hard of hearing individuals, and this includes, it spans various sectors, including, like I said, vocational training, access to counseling, and inclusive services. These services are essential in promoting independence and self-sufficiency among clients, particularly because deaf individuals encounter limited access and tailored employment resources in the hearing-centric job market. The Arizona Commission for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing and the ACDHH also plays a vital role in ensuring that communication support, like licensed interpreters and assistive technologies, are available across the state. And this kind of support enables deaf and hard of hearing individuals to engage more fully in community life and access and assess necessary health and public services. In addition, the ACDHH and Pima County initiatives focus on advocacy and educating employers about compliance with the ADA, which help create more accessible, inclusive work environments. Deaf blindness is a unique disability that combines varying degrees of hearing and vision loss, significantly impacting communication, mobility, and access to information. Individuals with this dual sensory impairment experience unique challenges as neither their remaining vision nor hearing can fully compensate for others' loss. Although the level of impairment varies widely among the individuals, deaf blindness can affect a person's ability to gather information either environmentally, socially, and educationally. So to support people who are deaf blind, there are programs across Arizona, educational support, transition planning, family engagement are a few. Deafblind individuals may also rely on interveners who are trained to facilitate communication and act as a bridge between the person and their environment. The support can be crucial for activities like school attendance, work, and community engagement. In addition, individualized educational and family support technology like braille displays, assistive listening devices, and tactile signing systems are invaluable tools that can help enhance communication and independence for those who have combined vision and hearing loss. Support service providers, or SSPs, you'll hear me say that today, are essential for assisting individuals who are deafblind by bridging communication gaps and enhancing independence. They help with daily tasks, environmental navigation, and access to information that would otherwise be inaccessible due to those dual sensory loss. The demand for SSPs has grown, and the awareness of deafblindness is a unique challenge, and it increases particularly with the advancements in recognizing the specific needs. Thanks. So change in services. Recent developments in regional services for the deaf and hard of hearing and deafblind communities in Arizona, including Pima County, reflect a stronger emphasis on supporting independence, access to resources, and social integration. These services often align with the Social Services Block Grant, which funds initiatives promoting independent living, economic self-sufficiency, and social inclusion. By meeting specific intents of the SSBG program, these updated services enhance accessibility, support communication needs, and address the isolation often faced by these communities. Key changes in regional services expansions for SSP provider and interpreting services is that as the demand grows, Arizona has prioritized and expanded training programs for SSPs, focusing on equipping them to assist both deafblind and deaf individuals. SSPs offer essential support by helping deafblind clients and environmental navigation and social interactions. Simultaneously, interpreter services have been enhanced to provide real-time communication support for deaf individuals, particularly in employment, healthcare, and legal settings. These changes meet the SSBG's intent to foster independent living and prevent social isolation, ensuring that deaf and deafblind individuals can practice more fully in their communities. Enhanced access and assistive technology support from SSBG funding. Arizona has bolstered programs like the Arizona Relay Service and expanded access to assistive devices such as hearing aids, visual alert devices, braille displays. This improved technology access helps individuals in these communities navigate public and private settings, improving their overall quality of life. By breaking down communication barriers, this aligns with SSBG's goals to enable self-sufficiency and support individuals in accessing essential services and building stronger community connections. Job training, placement, and advocacy programs. Employment assistance has become a priority through regional initiatives led by organizations around Pima County. These programs now include specialized vocational training, interview coaching, and workplace advocacy for both deaf and deafblind individuals. It enables them to acquire job-specific skills and connect with employers who understand and support their needs. These services meet SSBG's economic self-sufficiency goals by promoting meaningful employment and reducing reliance on other social services. Community and social integration programs. Programs that promote community inclusion have increased, aiming to reduce social isolation through organized group activities, family support, and peer counseling services. The Arizona Deafblind Project and similar initiatives have expanded to include social skills training, recreational activities, and peer networks for deaf, hard of hearing, or deafblind individuals. And these programs address SSBG's goal to promote community integration, provide vital social networks, and enabling individuals to lead well-rounded lives. Recent assessments have revealed evolving needs within Arizona's deaf and hard of hearing and deafblind communities, stemming from demographic shifts, technology advancements, and increased awareness of mental health and employment barriers. These changes highlight service gaps that require targeted intervention. The SSBG program, which funds initiatives supporting independent living, economic self-sufficiency, and community inclusion, provides a framework to address these needs. Here are the key changes in needs. Increased demand for communication and accessibility support. The rise of remote work, telehealth, and digital services has increased the need for accessible communication, such as captioning services and ASL interpreters. Many deaf and hard of hearing individuals face barriers in accessing healthcare and work resources, as these platforms are not optimized for those with sensory disabilities. Is the service intent that this aligns with SSBG's intent to foster self-sufficiency and independent living by ensuring equal access to healthcare and employment, as well as accommodating remote access needs through SSPs and interpreters. Mental health and social isolation concerns. The changing need is that deaf and hard of hearing and deafblind individuals often experience heightened social isolation, especially in rural areas with limited access to resources. Mental health needs are rising, and increased awareness of how communication barriers impact emotional well-being. Social integration and access to mental health counseling are critical, but few providers are skilled in communicating effectively with this population. It is the service intent that SSBG prioritizes preventing isolation and supporting mental health, and funding the counseling and peer support networks that can address these needs. Programs that focus on training mental health professionals in deaf culture and communication can improve the outcomes of these communities. There's a growing need for employment support in the workplace accommodations. Changes needed are that employment rates among deaf and hard of hearing and individuals remain significantly lower than the general population due to limited workplace accommodations and lack of job training suited to their needs. Deaf-blind individuals face a greater barrier. As employers become more open to hiring people with disabilities, there's a need for vocational training, job placement services, and advocacy for workplace accessibility. Is the service intent that SSBG funding supports economic self-sufficiency through job readiness training, job coaching, and workplace accommodation advocacy, addressing the gap in employment services for deaf and hard of hearing clients. Access to assistive technology and digital literacy programs. The changing need is that technology advancements have created new opportunities for communication. The access to assistive tech devices remains limited, especially for low-income individuals. With the increased reliance on technology, there's also a need for digital literacy training to empower deaf or hard of hearing and deafblind individuals to navigate online resources independently. Is a service intent that needs alignment with SSBG's focus on promoting independence and accessibility by funding assistive technology programs. Support for the digital literacy and device training can further enhance self-sufficiency, especially in rural and underserved areas. Expanding family and caregiver support. The changing need is that families and caregivers of deaf-blind individuals need specialized training and respite care services. As awareness of deafblindness grows, So does the need for family-centered support that includes educational resources and social support networks for caregivers managing the complex need of the deafblind family members. The service intent is that the SSBG program supports family preservation and stability, making it suitable for funding caregiver support programs and respite services. Family-focused resources help foster a supported home environment, promoting long-term social and emotional stability. Changes in funding. Arizona changes in funding our services to support deaf and hard of hearing and deafblind individuals reflect broader shifts in federal and state priorities and growing awareness of these communities and their specific needs. Here are some of the changes in funding. The SSBG adjustments. The funding shift is that nationwide SSBG funding has fluctuated in the recent years, impacting local agencies' capacity to provide consistent services for vulnerable populations, including the deaf and hard of hearing. And although SSBG funds remain the core source for social support services, competing priorities among states for these funds have led to more stringent allocations, requiring local agencies to prioritize specific programs. The service intent is that SSBG supports independent living, family support, and social integration. Increased state funding for assistive technology and communication services. The funding shift is that we recognizing that the essential role of communication accessibility, Arizona has directed additional state resources to support programs like Arizona Relay Service and assistive technology distribution. This funding is often supplemented by the ACDHH, and it helps offset the cost of the devices like hearing aids, captioning, and video relay services. It is the service intent that the funding in this area aligns with SSBG's goals of promoting self-sufficiency and access to essential services. Federal and state funding for employment programs. Funding shift is that there have been increased investment in both federal and state levels to support job training and placement for people with disabilities. Programs under the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, or WIOA, allocate funds to deaf, hard of hearing, and deafblind individuals to enhance job readiness and workforce accessibility. However, while some funding of these services has increased, competition among agencies for WIOA resources remains very high. It's a service intent that employment support is directly tied to SSBG's aim of fostering economic self-sufficiency. Expanding training and workforce accommodation funding is essential for addressing employment gaps among those communities, although funding limits can restrict how widely these programs are available. Increased focus on mental health funding for underserved populations. The funding shift we see is recent mental health funding increases, particularly through state-led initiatives and Medicaid, have created new opportunities to support mental health services for deaf, hard of hearing, and deafblind individuals. However, many providers still lack the specialized training required to serve these communities effectively. Initiatives like Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA, grant programs have aimed to address this gap. The service intent is that SSBG prioritizes mental health and social inclusion and funding changes to increase mental health services, mental health service access, and that we say that it's essential. Nevertheless, the need for specialized training for mental health professionals to communicate with and understand these populations remains underfunded. Changes in private grant and nonprofit funding. The funding shift is that private foundations and nonprofits, such as the May Stanley Smith Charitable Trust, have recently allocated more resources to disability access and awareness, including deaf and deafblind services. And these grants have enabled programs to address unique needs that public funding may overlook, such as SSP training, community-based accessibility projects, and peer support programs. These initiatives support SSBG's aim to enhance social integration and independent living. Here. All right. Data and outcomes and effectiveness of social services block grant, the SSBG funding, in addressing regional needs for deaf and hard of hearing and deafblind communities in Arizona highlights both the success and areas where continued support is necessary. Here are some key outcome data for Arizona and Pima County. Employment and economic self-sufficiency. Employment rates. The Arizona Department of Economic Security reports that employment support services funded through the SSBG and other programs have led to an increase in employment placements for individuals with disability, including the deaf and hard of hearing. However, employment rates for these communities remain lower than for other general populations, which with unemployment among deaf individuals was significantly higher than other state averages. Data from the ACDHH suggests that individuals receiving SSBG funding, job training, and workplace accommodation assistance see improved income stability. This has a positive ripple effect, reducing reliance on additional funding assistance and fostering economic self-sufficiency in alignment with the SSBG intents. Assistive device access is provided through the Arizona Relay Services, partially funded through SSBG, has an increased uptake in assistive technology with over 3,000 residents utilizing Relay services in 2023. And this expansion reflects a positive outcome in accessibility support for deaf and hard of hearing individuals, especially in the rural areas where isolation and limited resources are more prevalent. According to the Valley Center of the Deaf Services funded by SSBG, they have allowed a greater number of deafblind and deaf individuals to access public and social services independently. Approximately 75% of survey respondents reported improved confidence in accessing community services after receiving assistive technology support and independent living training funded by these grants. Arizona-specific data collected by the Helen Keller National Center indicates that approximately 70% of deafblind participants report improved social connectivity through SSP support and peer counseling programs, reducing isolation and increased community involvement. An increase in mental health support tailored to the deaf and deafblind populations, partially funded by SSBG, has led to a reduction in mental health crises within these groups. Agencies report that 40% of deaf individuals receiving SSBG supported counseling saw a reduction in self-reported depression, self-reported depressive symptoms, although barriers to mental health access still do remain. The program REACH, Arizona's SSBG allocation, allows for expanded services across 12 counties in 2022, and significantly increased outreach to rural areas where 45% of the deaf and hard of hearing individuals previously lacked access to support services. SSBG funding made it possible to establish new service points with over 1,500 new clients receiving assistance in areas like vocational training and digital literacy. The ACDHH surveys shows high satisfaction levels among the recipients, with 85% of deaf and hard of hearing participants indicating that SSBG supported services met or exceeded their needs, particularly in areas of accessibility and job readiness. Areas of improvement. While SSBG funding has been instrumental in improving outcomes for Arizona's deaf and deafblind communities, gaps remain. The need for more SSPs, improving mental health provider training, and consistent access to assistive devices and ongoing challenges noted by DES and ACDHH, continued funding and additional resources are necessary to bridge these gaps fully and further enhance effectiveness. And here we have where I pulled all our information from today, our resources. Just to briefly address some areas that we do have some more concerns on. In Pima County, Arizona, the pressing need for tailored support services for deaf and hard of hearing individuals highlights critical gaps in accessibility and resources. Here are some other areas in which we feel that SSBG funding might be eligible. Barriers in accessible services. The limited availability of resources specifically designed for hard of hearing individuals or deaf individuals creates significant challenges. Many face isolation, as we've talked about, to communication barriers, underscoring the necessity for programs that enhance access to essential services, including healthcare, education, and employment. Focus on communication support. Effective intervention requires prioritizing communication facilitation, which can include the provision of interpreters and assistive technologies. Programs that ensure these supports are in place can significantly improve engagement and quality of life for the individuals in our community. A holistic approach to employment. Enhancing employment opportunities must go beyond job placement. Comprehensive support, including job coaching, workplace advocacy, and tailored training programs, should be emphasized to prepare individuals for meaningful careers that accommodate their unique needs. Need for specialized support in deafblind individuals. The deafblind community faces even greater challenges due to the dual sensory loss. Programs must include specialized training for support service providers or SSPs who can assist with navigation, communication, access to information, ensuring that deafblind individuals can participate fully in society. Community awareness and advocacy. There is a critical need for ongoing advocacy to educate employers and the community about the rights and capabilities of deaf and hard of hearing individuals. Programs that promote understanding and compliance with the ADA can foster more inclusive environments. An emphasis on mental health and coping strategies. These social and psychological impacts of hearing disabilities necessitate targeted mental health interventions. Services that promote coping mechanisms and offer peer support can empower individuals, enhancing their resilience and quality of life. And finally, funding the resource allocation. Given the existing service gaps, it's essential for SSBG funding to prioritize programs that directly address these needs. Strategic investments in community-based services can help provide and build a robust support network for the deaf and hard of hearing individuals in Pima County. And with that, that's all I have. So
Thank you so much, Jessica. I appreciate you. It's clear you put a lot of time and effort into that presentation. I did want to allow for Jose to provide any other context or insights that might be appropriate given your presentation, and of course allow for those that are attending this afternoon in this meeting to ask any questions. So Jose, I'm going to turn it over to you to see if there's anything you'd like to add.
Yes. I mean, that's a lot of information. It's so accurate. Jessica had shared this information. This program is the only program within the state of Arizona, and it's statewide, and we have a lot of individuals here in Tucson, here in the agency. Fortunately, we have the program that we provide services for deaf, individuals, and that's a real priority. And deafblind individuals as well. They are included.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Jose, if you didn't have anything else to add, I was going to go ahead and open up, see if anyone in the meeting had any questions. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add at this time? I'm going to go ahead and allow those that are on the meeting right now, if you have any questions for either Jose or Jessica, feel free to raise your hand or go ahead and ask. See if I see any hands up at this time. All right, I don't see any hands up at this time, so perhaps there might be some questions as we move forward with items on the agenda. So with that in mind, we're going to go ahead and move to the next item on the agenda. Thank you so much, Jose and Jessica, for your presentation, your insights. Appreciate it.
You are welcome. Thank you.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and move to the next item on the agenda. So I'm going to go ahead and ask my IT team to stop the sharing of the screen and go ahead and put the slides back on. All right. So at this point in the agenda, we are at item number 4, which is the final review of fact sheet information and of course funding amounts. And so we've kind of went through the process of reviewing fact sheet information, whether it was part of a presentation or talking points that people had shared either in past meeting or this one today. So we're going to go ahead and do kind of a reminder of the funding amounts because on the next item on the agenda, we're actually going to move towards having a discussion around recommendations for DES pertinent to these funding and service intents. So I thought before we start that discussion, it would be helpful to just kind of have a refresher of what those funding and service intents are and the associated breakdowns. I know, and that information was sent out in email as well as shared in previous meetings, but I think it's still helpful for what we're going to try to accomplish today. So I'm going to ask my IT team to go ahead and put up the different funding and service intents pertinent to the 5 broad service categories. And so we're going to end, so to speak, with Workforce Development Administration and Rehabilitative Services Administration, I believe. And but we're going to start with Department of Child Safety. So don't quote me on the order. I might have them a little bit mischaracterized there, but we will hit all 5 service categories in our approach to do a refresher, if you will. So for Department of Child Safety, just as a reminder, these are the funding and service intents pertinent to this particular broad service category. And as you can see, there is supportive interventions and guidance counseling in 2 different categories, adults and children. And then, of course, low-income families, and then behavioral therapeutic activities. And so if you look at the associated breakdowns as it's listed here for state fiscal year 2026 at the local plan level, in the respective order that was illustrated for supportive intervention and guidance counseling, it's 34,602, followed by 182,427, and then followed by $69,003. So you'll see the total there on the bottom. And if my eyes aren't misleading me, you should see on your screen the total of 286,031. Apologize for the delay there. The glare on my screen makes it a little challenging at times to read that. So hopefully I said that correctly. All right, so we're going to go ahead and do a quick overview of the next broad service category, which is DAAS, or Division of Aging and Adult Services. And this category is for home care for elderly adults, personal care, housekeeping, home health, et cetera. And you'll see at the state fiscal year 2026 local plan level, 350,648. For case management related services, 348,022. And then, of course, home delivered meals, 80,725. And the total for this particular broad service category is 779,395. And then we will move to the next broad service category, which should be the Division of Community Assistance and Development, DCAD. Just a quick overview on these, because there is a lot of different breakdowns, some of which sound similar. However, when you break down the very specific service intents, you'll see that they shift a tiny bit. And since those elements were discussed in a previous meeting, I'm not going to take the time to go through all of the different service intents. We're just going to focus on the broad service category, if you will, and then the associated funding amounts at the local plan level for state fiscal year 2026. So for supportive intervention and guidance counseling, you'll see 24,766, crisis intervention and shelter services, 63,580, case management, 37,711. And then you'll see there's 3 different legal assistants, and they are pertinent to different types of legal matters. And so the first is legal assistance for adults, usually adults with domestic violence situations, 19,216. The same amount is allocated in the state fiscal year 2026 local plan level. I shouldn't say the word allocated, but in the intents of funding it's 19,216 for civil legal matters for low income residents. And then the latter category is civil legal matters also for low income residents, but there is a distinction between the two. And that amount is 28,565. The first one is to protect the rights of individuals by providing consultation and legal services for individuals and families facing eviction or needing landlord-tenant mitigation. And the latter is to protect the rights of individuals by providing assistance with civil legal issues, including domestic situations, landlord-tenant problems, and obtaining other types of services. So that's kind of the difference there. Emergency shelter is 53,128, and that is for adults of domestic violence victims. And then housing support services, 43,148. And the combined state fiscal year 2026 local plan level for the Division of Community Assistance and Development, DCAD, is 289,330. All right, we will move to the next one, which should be Workforce Development Administration. And you'll see employment services, and it's for adults, any individual 18 years of age and older. And the local plan level for state fiscal year 2026 is 41,708. And then lastly, Rehabilitation Services Administration, or SA, is for interpreter services for deaf adults. So deaf adults who need interpreter assistance in accessing needed services. State fiscal year 2026 local plan level is 23,955. And then the next one is supportive intervention guidance counseling for, and these are not my word choices. This is as written from the Department of Economic Security. So I will kindly ask them to change their language to hard of hearing if possible versus the language that's listed here where it says hearing impaired persons. So hard of hearing persons who have problems in adjusting to their disability at work and in family and interpersonal relationships. The state fiscal year 2026 local plan level is 34,208. And so the total amount is 58,163.
And Jose says, thank you so much for letting them know that we would appreciate changing the language.
You're welcome. I will include that in my email, so to speak, as a follow-up to our meeting, so that I could bring that into their attention. So yeah. Right. All right. So I think I covered all five. Yes. All right. So with that in mind, we're going to move forward to I think it's the last item on the agenda, which is the main focus, if you will, of all of this process, which is to make some funding prioritizations and recommendations. And so the task before us is to decide what to recommend to DES. So there's different ways to look at it, so to speak. One could make a recommendation to leave the funding and service intents as written as is. That is one. Another is to make some kind of shift, meaning move a certain amount of money perhaps between services, but still within the same broad service category. So since we left off with Rehabilitation Services Administration, I'll use that as an example. So there was their interpretive services for deaf adults, and then there was supportive intervention guidance counseling. And there was two different amounts allocated. Using it as an example only, one possible recommendation could be to move a certain amount of monies from supportive intervention into interpreter services. In the same breath, another type of recommendation could also be moving monies potentially from one broad service category to another. And whatever that recommendation might be, or prioritization, if you will, there would need to be a rationale or context given for why that recommendation is being made. So that is part of discussion at hand. And all of these recommendations would get served up to our regional council for further review and consideration. And then it will be submitted to DES. And of course, it does go through public comment period. So there's other opportunities for the general public to provide comment as well. So, all right, so we will go ahead and start the process of just opening up a dialogue about what recommendations you would like to discuss more fully and what your thoughts are at this time. And typically at this juncture is usually when people start to have some questions for people that, you know, gave presentations, just to make sure that they have the appropriate context, or want to make sure that they have examined everything in the way that they would like to prior to making a potential recommendation. So if anyone would like to give some thoughts or ask some questions around this as we begin to make potential recommendations on anything, or recommending that the funding and service intents remain as they are written right now, I will open to go ahead and start the discussion. I'm going to leave that to the group at this time.
Janine, this is Chris McNamara from Beacon. And
Sure.
question, I just want to make sure that you know, there's no conflict of interest violation on my part. Of course, we do receive SSBG grant, an SSBG grant. So yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm not yeah, in any type of creating or conflict of interest.
Right. Yeah. So as part of this process, since you do receive money directly through SSBG, you definitely have to walk a very fine line in terms of just providing context and making sure people that might have an opinion about what recommendations are made, that you're just offering context around a lot of the different items that you shared pertinent to the fact sheets.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Janine. I don't know if you see my hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. I probably didn't. I was looking at my screen, making sure I could read everything, and I probably missed it. I apologize.
That's okay. Well, you know, I think I said in the first meeting that this is like, you know, all of these areas need much more funding than they're getting. They're all critical and important. And it's like, you know, choosing your favorite child, right? So a really difficult task for everybody that's participating. But this is my analysis, and people may agree or disagree with it. I think I mentioned this in a prior meeting, that what really stands out for me is the significant funding that is going to the area for seniors. And I know how critical that is, and I take care of a mother with dementia, and I know services are needed. However, it has more than 50% of the total allocation in that particular area. And I think Lisa made a very compelling argument in the last meeting for the needs that are in the area of the community assistance and development. And in my mind, in particular, for areas that have to do with eviction prevention or addressing homelessness. Those 4 areas are supportive intervention, legal assistance for civil legal issues, emergency shelter, and housing support services. My recommendation is reducing the overall amount to the area for seniors by $300,000 and reallocating it by doubling the spending in those 4 areas, which comes out to just under $300,000. Oh, well, it doesn't actually. Let me take that back. That comes out to about $150,000 going into those 4 areas. So that leaves about another $150,000 to be allocated somewhere else.
So I'm trying to make sure my notes are accurate. So I might ask you to kind of restate that and make sure I have that correct.
Sure. You want me to put, if I can share my screen, I have a little chart that might help.
Okay. Sure, that'd be great.
Hang on one second. I can figure this out. Screen. Can you see that?
I can. Can everyone else that's on the meeting see it as well? Everyone, I think I saw some nodding of heads. Can everyone see the screen that's being shared? Okay, all right, I see Tony's.
Yes,
right,
I can.
And again, my certainly open for discussion, but my recommendation is dropping the spending to the area for seniors, and I apologize what that particular section is called, but by 300,000. So this would leave about 150,000 for reallocation to other particular areas.
All right, so let me make sure. So when you say the 300,000 from DCAD, is that correct?
Correct.
No, I'm sorry, DAAS. I apologize. Division of Aging and Adult Services. I said the wrong one.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so and you were saying that from
because they're
which
getting
category, the home care or from case management or just period?
I don't have any particular input into that. It's just
in general.
It would drop their total category to I don't know, about 480,000 or something like that.
And then if you could put your slide back up just so that I have that for reference for the proposed recommendation, I can take some better notes there. Thank you. And for just the sake of having the actual documentation, Bonnie, since this is your recommendation, and obviously there's still discussion to be had, but just so that I have it, would you mind also emailing it to me?
Sure.
Just so that I have it. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
This way I can double, triple check and make sure I have it written correctly.
You got it.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. All right, so thank you, Bonnie. I appreciate you. I know for the reason that you just said, it could be hard to make a recommendation in general because you recognize the importance and the need that everybody has spoken to. So I appreciate your willingness to contribute some thoughts and a recommendation, even if it can be hard to hear at times. So for people, because everyone's very passionate about the work and all the great services that are provided in our region. So I'm just going to go and open it up for discussion and see what thoughts are. And again, it's a recommendation, and obviously we need to have a discussion around it. But we are only making recommendations, and it still has to go through public comment, and it still has to go to regional council. So I just want to make sure that everyone understands that we're only making a recommendation.
Can I hear the recommendation one more time? Just because, I'm sorry, somebody walked in my office and distracted me. So I would love to hear it before we move on. Sorry, so sorry.
Maybe just put it on the screen again too.
Yeah.
Or did that help, Tom?
That would be great.
Yeah, I'll ask Bonnie to go ahead and put it back up on the screen, and that might have been my fault. I might have encouraged her to take it down a little too soon, so I apologize for that.
I have my hand up, so can I jump in?
Oh yeah,
also?
Go ahead.
And I know
Sorry.
Tony has his hand up too.
Yes, go ahead, Jessica, and then I'll call on Tony, and then we'll make sure we come back to Mr. McKinney. So,
or if you want to, I don't, Tom, did you want clarification on this one before we jump into?
No, I'm fine. I just wanted to see it again. I totally missed this part of it, so I just didn't know what was being recommended. So thank you for putting it back up.
Well, yes, this is Lisa, and I think, I'm really struggling with taking money away from anybody. And I guess my first question is just as a general recommendation, if this is a channel to DES, can we, maybe put it out there that we don't want cuts to anything. And in fact, we need more money for many of these areas, especially the ones that we highlighted with the fact sheets. And just getting that in writing and putting that in front of them, I think would be my top recommendation. But then beyond that, and I think too, and that's partially because another challenge is I just don't feel like I, and maybe other people here too, I'll only speak for myself, have enough context about other funding sources and how it all fits together. But I would hope maybe DES would have more knowledge about how the other state agencies are funding things. And maybe they would be able to use, our requests for our need areas and move things around rather than us making a decision without the full knowledge about what the other funding sources are. So that's my thought in just kind of that blanket recommendation. And then on the other hand, the one area that I don't feel like I have a solid understanding of is the Department of Child Safety area. And so, I mean, I hesitate to make this like a firm recommendation. So this is maybe just more for the group, but I think there is a lot of overlap between some of the supportive services that are outlined there that do overlap with some of the housing related case management ones. And, certain things that are listed in the DCS service intents and activities, like counseling for problem pregnancies. I don't feel like I encounter like an increased need for that in the area, but I can't say for sure. But I just wondered because, that is a very large amount of money going to that area. So maybe that was one that could be shifted for, it's meant to assist low-income children and families with available resources, but maybe focusing that on specifically housing resources could be a potential recommendation for a shift.
Okay, so make sure I have that correctly understood as far as the last of the recommendations, so to speak, that you had spoke to. Could you just rephrase that one more time, which category it was under? I thought it was under Department of Child Safety.
Yeah, Department of Child Safety. Wondering if there's overlap to focus those on the Department of Community Assistance Division and specifically for housing related needs, since that is a need that's been really articulated by the community.
Right, so it's under Division of Community Assistance and Development, is that right?
Well, that would be, potentially shifting it there. But I don't know, Janine, I'm hesitant to have this in writing associated with my name. I don't know if I know enough to, I don't know if I want to call it a recommendation as much as a open for discussion for this group, but I know we have rules, so.
Sure. No, I'm hearing it as open for discussion at this juncture, or the potential for a recommendation, because we just started this this discussion. So I'm hearing it both from Bonnie and yourself as, these are just thoughts at this juncture of things to consider, discuss, and potentially be recommendations. So that helps allow people to have some comfort in the stage that we're at right now. I'll share that. Let's see. I know Tony was gonna say or share or something or ask a question, and then I want to make sure I don't forget to go back to Tom McKinney.
So I'm just gonna say we don't receive any SSBG funding. And I've been in this game in one shape or form for over 40 years, and it's always difficult to split the baby and play King Solomon. And so Bonnie, I commend you for looking at it differently. I agree with Lisa. Who are we going to cut out if we move money around who may need that money? And to that end, I will say that currently the state of Arizona receives 1.9 million or $1 billion for opioids, and it's all being spent on treatment. In November, there was the Kroger opioid settlement for another $68 million. And I know we want to save lives, but I also think that money, if this group could write a letter either to DES and recommend or suggest that some of that money come out of treatment and go into prevention and housing, it would certainly help with that issue. The reality for me is the money we're talking about is super small. Let's face it. It may mean a lot to the organization who gets it, but it's not going to go far. And I have a firm belief that we need to leave it where it is, because I think with the budget cuts coming from the state, many organizations who are receiving that money need that money to continue what they're doing. And that's my soapbox.
So, Tony, I appreciate your perspective. So this is a question. So with what you're saying, is it poised in a manner that suggests that your thoughts are to leave the monies the way they are? And I'm wondering if that bodes well, perhaps with what Lisa Florin was sharing was, perhaps bring it to DES's attention, the need for additional funding, perhaps in different service intents, et cetera. Because for those that are on the committee today, some don't feel comfortable speaking to other categories because that's not their purview, or it would be inappropriate to speak based on how they receive funding. And then to Bonnie's point, if we did have to make a tough decision, so to speak, in terms of moving funds from one place to another, there are some thoughts on where those monies could go. So perhaps her thoughts on where those monies could go, perhaps highlight a starting point in discussion of where we might speak to suggesting to DES that there's a need for additional funding, which would then also allow for the group to decide, what other categories would we potentially make recommendations in that same manner that were not illustrated in Bonnie's table, because Bonnie's table was limited based on the example of 300,000, right? If we had an infinite amount of money, you could draw the table much bigger, right? So I want to be fair to Bonnie on that. So that's a big question, but I'm throwing it out there to try to kind of reconcile, if you will, or summarize what I'm hearing so far, and kind of throw back out to the group on what are our thoughts at this stage in terms of potential recommendations. And so while everyone simmers down on that, I want to make sure that I am fair to Mr. McKinney, because he did we'll start with a question saying, like, can you bring that back up because I missed something, and then I don't know if Mr. McKinney had any other questions or thoughts at this
Can I
juncture.
just answer your question succinctly?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if I were to make a recommendation at this point, I would leave the money where it's at currently. But I would also, and I know this in previous years, and I'm going back 20 years, this planning group actually included some funding thoughts for DES to consider, or recommendations, and where money needs to go or additional money needs to go. And I would recommend that we look at some of the opioid settlement money to take care of some of the problem that exists in Pima County, whether it's housing, prevention, education, wherever, to expand upon the work that's being done.
I have that written down. So I have the additional dollars from the opioid settlement to go somewhere in meeting needs in Pima County to expand the work that's being done. That's kind of the general comment there.
I would put an S on the end of settlement, since there's multiple pots.
Okay, all right. I think I've captured that, and I know Bonnie's going to send me what she had shared just so that I have it as part of my notes for what was discussed. And of course, part of leading towards whatever recommendations the group makes. So Tom, did you have?
I have multiple thoughts.
Okay,
So,
go ahead.
I think, more money is always the answer to everything. So opioid or wherever would help all of us. This is like the third group I serve on that is allocating funds that are super limited. And in most cases, they've all opted to just allocate the same. So it's just easier, right? Because I'm in no position to decide in other realms what's better and what's worse. But I would say the challenge is that sometimes we're looking at funding and who will survive and who won't survive, but who's having the biggest outcome? And how does that outcome have a ripple effect on the rest of the system? Again, I'm very much like Lisa. I don't want to put my name on anything that says cut money from somebody else, because we're all out there scraping for it. But in the end, and I think about this with Bonnie and the Prosperity Initiative and listening to the Board of Supervisors, at some point in time, they're going to have to make a choice of allocating what is a limited pool of money to achieve that outcome. And is that outcome bigger and better for the community than every little thing that we're all doing? So it's just an interesting dilemma. This is the third group that I sit on, and the recommendation has typically been to be the same. Just give everybody the same amount because the organization needs it. But what does the community need? Okay, I'm done.
I think those are good points of consideration, and it is tough. I mean, the funding doesn't really change that much, and it puts everyone kind of in that awkward stance of how do you make those decisions, and perhaps the best decision you can make seemingly is to leave it the way it is. But having an outcomes perspective is worth noting and putting into the discussion. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I did ask DES the question that Bonnie had posed, I think, in the first meeting regarding what goes into the decision-making process for the funding and service intents related to different regions, if you will, in the state of Arizona and how those decisions are made. And then obviously some context about what shapes the funding amounts for each of the broad service categories, whether it be DAS or DCS, WDA, et cetera, like we've talked about today. And the feedback that I got back from DES is, I guess, rather limited in the sense that, do I want a 14-page essay from DES, or do they just want to keep it really simple and short? And perhaps brevity was the way that they chose to go, right? So the only information I really got back was that the same allocation has been presented over past couple of years. And it seems that the award level has plateaued, and we've seen that, right? The amount of money doesn't really change that much. And there's always the potential for the amount to decrease, right? That's always out there. We never really know, but historically it has been the same. And then the decision-making process, of course, includes factors like population for different regions across the state, division needs, and of course, you know, those final decisions are made by the Department of Economic Security's leadership. And that's the brief perspective that I received from DES. And I guess the short answer to the long question is it's complicated, right? So, you know, that's what I had. I'm willing to send an email back that says, can you offer additional insights if that's, you know, helpful to the committee. But I did want to at least share that because it is appropriate for what we're talking about right now, and it bodes well with what's on the agenda. And it was something that was asked in one of the first meetings. So let's see, make sure I don't miss anyone else's hands up. Don't think I see anyone else's hand up.
Janine, I have mine. I think there are some other.
Sorry.
folks.
Okay.
No, it's okay.
I see my hand, but I can't tell whose it is at times. That's my challenge. I've seen a hand up for a while, but it just stays up, and then I can't tell who's the one that put the hand up. It doesn't show in my box. So I apologize. Sorry, Jessica.
No, I just wanted to ditto everybody's thoughts, because at least put it out there that I also would recommend that we keep the amounts the same. Just because, you know, I don't understand the other service levels. I think that might be the best opportunity, and then to again ditto and ask you know, if there are additional funds to be allocated, as it seems that all of these services do need more money. And so that would be my recommendation. But I just wanted to make sure that you know, that I'm in there and dittoing that this is a need, and I want to you know, I can relate to obviously some of these services here, but that there's no way that I think that I would be able to have the knowledge to be able to pull something from someone else. I mean, there could be clear reasons and expense wise why some of these services are receiving more funds than others. So
thank you, Jessica. I appreciate that.
I think Christopher's had his hand up for a bit.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. I'm gonna have to ask my IT team, what is it that I'm not seeing that helps me see who has their hands up? So there, now I see it. I must have clicked on the right box for once. Finally, a victory lap for me at 3:28 in the afternoon. Sorry about that. Chris, go ahead.
Hi. Well, thank you, and thanks, Lisa. Yeah, you know, just kind of adding to the commentary. I mean, I actually, you know, I like where Bonnie's coming from as far as like, you know, making some choices. I do feel like when we're on some committees like this, we do take the easy way, and we check the box, and we just, you know, none of us want to ruffle feathers or hurt any other organizations, you know, and oftentimes, and so we do kind of take the path of least resistance. But what we're also hearing though is from folks, you know, the reason why we do that is that we don't have enough information, right, about things like what the impact is, what you know, the impact on the most importantly, like, to me, it's not even about the organizations, right? It's about the money is intended to support people and to help those people. So how many people are impacted? What are the impacts and outcomes for those individuals throughout these various programs? And I think that having that information, you know, I don't know if for this fiscal year or in the future, would be very helpful in us, you know, to make those kinds of decisions. Like, because, you know, I don't know, looking at these categories, if we're talking about one organization getting $300,000, or is it, you know, 10 organizations getting $30,000, right? In what percentage of that budget? So just, I'm kind of talking in circles. And then from there, like, is it competitive funding? So even if we keep the funding, you know, at the same level, like, is it just going to be the same to every organization that continues, you know, that's gotten it in the past? And is there any accountability in that, you know, with the funding? And you know, or is it non-competitive? You know, if one organization gets it one year, they're just going to get it in perpetuity, and if funding goes up, they'll just keep getting that, and they got an increase or decrease and so on. So those are some of the things that kind of come to mind, you know, as I play through, you know, think through this. But I, you know, talking out of the other side of my mouth, though, I do think that if we were to cut down certain sections this year, that that future groups might get together and then take the path of least resistance and then not come back and then refund those areas again, like in the future, and they kind of keep the same pattern going in the future as well. So I guess I could talk out of both sides of my mouth, but I think it would be helpful, if we can get more information on organizations, outcomes, and things like that, to help frame our discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to jump in just because I'm responding to Christopher real fast. I think that's a really good point. It's difficult to think of like a continuous quality improvement funding cycle just based on this kind of potential idea. It's like service intent, right? Like this is what we're hoping the money will go towards, but we actually, because we don't know who's carrying out the work necessarily, we don't know if that's happening. So I understand maybe why we haven't been given information about specific programs, but I think that would be really helpful in the future for if we were ever going to shift any of the funding around, because organizations able to perform the work is like a really key factor of actually having an impact.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate that. I do see several hands up. I see Chris, your hand's still up, but I see Lisa Reams' hand up, and I see Bonnie's hand up. So I'm not sure who's had their hand up the longest, so I apologize. But I feel like, Lisa, I haven't heard from you in a bit, so I'm going to try to go ahead and let you have the opportunity first, and then I'll go with Bonnie.
Sure, thanks. Trying to speak just from a place of older adult services in general. And I also appreciate the idea that I like the world in which we're able to truly figure out what the best uses of limited funding are available. And as everyone has said, there's just not enough for anybody to do what they want to do with it. And so trying to figure out how to slice the pie a little thinner somewhere is always challenging. What I've seen being around this table for a number of years is that the only times I think we've had really significant conversations about making changes was related to there's a change in significantly in the community need or the community funding available in other areas. So in this case, looking at that from sort of the older adult perspective, the need has increased significantly and the other funding available has decreased significantly. So for this being a year that we would then look to decrease older adult funding, that I'm not sure that doesn't fit either of those criteria in my mind. The older adult population is increasing every year relative to the population of Pima County. The population of older adults that are having a harder time affording food or living safely in their own homes is increasing significantly in the past 2 to 4 years. And the funding and service levels to support that has decreased by 30 to 35%, and wait lists have skyrocketed. So not sure it's the right year to discuss that. But at the same time, I also want to say that I also, like Bonnie, understand the desire to want to look at the pie and say, are we doing the right things with funding available to our county? I mean, in this instance too, you also have to look at things like the services you're talking about here. These are older adults that are actively receiving in-home care and meals today. So reducing funding levels for those would actively then be there's not other funding available to serve them. So it would be actively stopping services, stopping food and stopping services to older adults getting those now. That's not a decision. That's a decision I would have a hard time making. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate that. And I don't know, but perhaps, Jessica could speak to how it works, with the programs and services that she spoke to in the region in terms of, if it's similar, right? If you take money, let's say, from the broad service category that's pertinent to what she spoke to, does the same thing happen? You'd be basically saying no to something that was originally a yes. I don't know that if that's how it works in other broad service categories, but to Lisa's point, it is something worth noting and taking into consideration. So I appreciate you sharing that perspective. Bonnie, go ahead.
I just want to say first how much I appreciate the really thoughtful discussion and really good points everybody is making. And so I want to just add some comments on some of those and then leave us with a question that I think maybe is critical to the final decision. So I just want to say I agree with Tony. Boy, if there's any way we can get a bigger pie, that's the way to go. Certainly the intersection of homelessness and opioid use is very clear. And I'm sure there are others on this committee. We'd be happy to put some kind of a rationale together to be able to advocate for that. It certainly makes sense if we could use that those funds in places like emergency shelters, but also in a preventative role. It would go a long way. And Lisa raised the question about funding streams, and of course you'd have to look both at state and federal, right, funding streams, and that's Cassie is on this call, and I used to work in workforce development. It's near and dear to my heart, but that's what, and it has a teeny part of this pie, less than $50,000 going into workforce development. And again, if you're thinking about poverty prevention, that's an obvious key area. But I'm not advocating for an increase in that because I know, that there are significant federal dollars that flow through the state through WIOA as the main one, but others as well that do reinforce workforce development. So I think it's important to keep an eye on that, but also to remember federal funding that ties into state funding. And also it's difficult to even factor that in because we don't know what the need is, right? So it's kind of a correlation of several factors, I think, that would influence that in that area. And I just want to say, I'm assuming, the state has a selection process that looks at performance and other issues when they're allocating those funds. I don't think that's our job. I don't think we need that information. I think our job is to try to figure out how to slice this pie up based on what we know our community needs. And that's why I, again, really want to strongly advocate for the area of housing. So I was involved in standing up the EELS program, which is an eviction prevention program. I've worked in that area for a number of years now during the pandemic. And I can tell you that, one of the groups that we saw a tremendous shift in is older adults. More older adults are facing eviction and potential homelessness, as cuts across age groups. So I just think, if people aren't stably housed, if people are homeless, it is such a ripple effect into every other area. And we are nationally and as a region facing a crisis in housing. The ARPA funds are going away. I think, again, Lisa made a very compelling case in our last meeting with a lot of data that's in there that really shapes housing, I think, is a particularly strong need. And I think the question I just want to ask to those folks who are saying, let's leave the status quo as it is, I would like to hear the argument for why more than half of these funds go to seniors. Again, I think it's a critical need. I know ICS is on the call. I love what they do as well with PCOA. But, children suffer poverty at 50% the rate of seniors in this country. So families with kids are, I think, a critical group to think of in the distribution of these funds. So I would the dollars should be given to one of the categories that serves people who are 65 and older. I don't know what the cutoff age is, but older adults. So I'll leave it there.
Okay, thank you, Bonnie. I appreciate that. So I'm kind of just to recap a little bit. I'm hearing a lot of questions that need perhaps some answers or some additional context to broaden the perspective before the group feels perhaps more comfortable deciding whether or not they feel more comfortable with leaving the funding the way it is, or perhaps making a recommendation to make some kind of adjustments. That's what the general message that I'm hearing, and I'm asking the group if that's perhaps accurate. Some of the pieces that I'm hearing that we're seeking either clarification or additional context around are kind of the big question that Bonnie posed, which is, why it's a percentage, so to speak, is so much in one particular demographic, right? Older adults. Another question, if you will, that I heard was about outcomes, and I think Mr. McKinney spoke to that. And then I believe Chris and Lisa also kind of pointed to in terms of just having a better understanding of, the number of organizations that are served, the outcomes, kind of that compare and contrast of, this is funding and service intense, and how do we compare and contrast it to the outcomes or the number of organizations. And I know there was some other questions in there in terms of like what percentage of the budgets. And I think there was something about whether or not it was competitive funding and accountability pieces. But so if I'm not mistaken, I think those were kind of the general questions, but also what other funding sources, if you will, might be potentially out there to help bridge some gaps, but also what funding sources might be going away that it's important for us to also recognize as we compare it with shifts in need. Because to Lisa Reams's point, the aging population is increasing, some of the challenges around housing, et cetera. But each broad service category has kind of their talking points of where they're seeing needs change and shift in the funding amounts, and having an increased demand. So balancing that perspective with what other funding sources are out there that are perhaps new or could be made new, back to Tony's point, and then what funding sources are perhaps diminishing or have dried up, so to speak. So if those are accurate, and I haven't left any off, I guess the question that remains is the group suggesting that because we have these questions, so to speak, kind of lingering, that we as a group would like to hit pause on making a recommendation until we get perhaps some more answers or some more context, and then once we get that, perhaps have an additional meeting in a few weeks. I mean, I would have to look at the calendar to give a best guess on a date, but perhaps in a couple weeks, to kind of regroup and say, here's additional context, here's what we know, and then move forward with recommendations at that juncture. Is that what I'm hearing, or am I mishearing or misunderstanding something at this point?
My question, I guess, to the group would be like, even with more information, would folks be willing to, rock the apple cart? Anyway, even if we had more information, would folks even be willing to make adjustments in those funding levels across areas? Like, does it matter, or do folks generally have the idea that it's going to be the same?
I would feel comfortable maybe shaking it up. Also, because at the end of the day, I feel like this is a recommendation to DES, and so maybe there is something worthwhile of presenting them with a different way of looking at things, just to even kind of start different thinking. And if we had, I don't know, like a specific framework or justification for how we would want to divide up the pie differently. I mean, I feel like I'm willing to put a little bit more time into that, like one more meeting, if we were interested.
Right,
I am
thank you.
too.
And I would say I am as well. I would like to add another caveat. If this group decides to move funding around, I don't know how we notify the agencies, but in all fairness, we should give them an opportunity to plan, whether that falls to us or to DES.
We're talking about 2026, correct, Janine? So
Is for state fiscal year 2026,
I
correct?
would hope that DES would be the one that would reach out to all the agencies and say, hey, we've got a shift. I love the concept, and I'm fine with one more meeting since I missed the first two. I got bandwidth now. I'd love to propose something different. I would love to propose something that maybe has additional funding to the whole pool, but maybe a different way of allocating it. So if it's just to add funding and everybody gets the same percentage, that's not of interest to me, but truly looking at where do we want to make a difference, that would be, and there is more funding needed. Lisa's not wrong. I mean, the need has increased. So, but you know, I'm up for, I guess, shaking the tree a little, as long as my name's not on it, Lisa. Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like, and unless someone has a different opinion, it sounds like so far there's several people that were comfortable with having another meeting, and my best guess for a tentative date would be November 21st. So if people want to kind of earmark that as a placeholder, it's again tentative at this point, but that's what my thoughts are at this juncture. And then and more than likely at the same time being 2 p.m. But again, that's a tentative time. So I'm hearing that, and then I'm hearing that assuming we have additional context, there are some people that are open to potentially making some recommendations that would include making some shifts in terms of how the pie is divided or allocated, or if it still makes sense, but then just deciding with perhaps a little bit more confidence to leave things alone, but at least knowing that you went through due diligence to try to understand it better before making that recommendation. So is that what I'm hearing? Bonnie, I think I saw your hand up.
Yeah. I'm curious, Janine, how this works. Are we the Supreme Court and you can have a majority and a minority position? Are we a jury and we can't complete our work until we're unanimous? Or what's the end game for us?
I think the end game, in an ideal state is to have general consensus around what we want to do. Although you as a committee can serve up different recommendations, saying, one of the recommendations as from this committee is to perhaps move money, and if we were to do so, this is what it might look like, and here's kind of the why behind it. Under the pretense of, X, Y, and Z, depending on, the identification of other funding sources or whatnot. Or another recommendation from the committee is to leave funding as is. And both recommendations could arguably get served up to regional council. Again, in an ideal state, and the intent would be for us to have consensus on what recommendation we'd be moving forward with. So
Can I
they
just
are just recommendations.
If the 21st is the date, that's a super big challenge for me, unless it's in the morning.
Okay.
Only because we booked our staff holiday party, so I can't really miss it. I mean,
I appreciate the feedback. I'll see what
Oh yeah, I'm also
I'll see what
unavailable
dates
at
are
that time.
available, but I wanted to be fair to the committee since everyone's on right now, to saying like that's kind of my best guess right now. An alternative date might be the 19th, but that just kind of shortens the window for us to get those additional pieces of information. So I'm a little hesitant on that date, but it is potentially another date for consideration. So.
Okay, thank you.
And I really appreciated, Bonnie, that you came with kind of a breakdown. So my goal, and if anyone else wants to try to do it too, is to maybe come with some sort of like plan that we could work off of to build something, I think that is a helpful way. I'll at least say that I'll try to come with a potential idea to throw into the mix.
I know I'm trying to be respectful of not only the time that we have allocated for this meeting, and I know we have interpreter services contributing their time as well. So I want to be respectful for everyone that's on this particular meeting. And I know we still have a couple hands up. So in the hope that I can make sure that all voices are heard in the 10 minutes I think that we have remaining, I'm going to go ahead and allow Lisa to share, and then I see Bonnie's hand up. And then if there isn't anyone else with final thoughts, I will move to the next slide, which I believe is the adjournment of the meeting. So go ahead, Lisa.
My question is just, I totally respect people wanting to meet again and talk through it. And we talked about wanting to have more data, more numbers to look at on the couple of main issues we've been discussing related to older adults and related to emergency housing and homelessness issues. We've provided through presentations a great deal of data already. So what is it that we're bringing to this next meeting? Because I mean, I'd love to prepare something if there are other questions, but I don't know what additional data is being requested at this point. And I don't want us to make a time, move things around on all of our busy schedules, and then come here and we still don't really have a yardstick of what we're considering.
That's a good question, Lisa. So I'm going to go ahead and open it to the group. Anyone care to give some specifics on what they'd like to see if we were to still move forward with another meeting? And I know, Bonnie, your hand's up, so maybe you have the answer to that question. So I'll make sure I get to you, but was there anyone else that had any thoughts on that question posed by Lisa Reams? All right, go ahead, Bonnie. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I think it's a good question. I'm not the only data that I was thinking of, and I think I brought it up maybe 2 meetings ago, Janine, was historical data. I'd be curious if we took, say, a 5-year snapshot, what the funding levels were, even percentages by these 4 or 5 categories would be helpful for me to see, yeah. And I think we have to have another meeting because I don't think we have consensus. So I think if nothing else, we've got to have another meeting for that reason. But again, yeah, never mind. That's enough said.
So I'm kind of hearing that people are asking for some historical data, 5-year snapshot, and that's probably coming more from DES, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct, Bonnie? And with that, perhaps some of those layers, if you will, of context are also in alignment with what I think different people had mentioned, meaning like number of organizations served, outcomes related to service intents, perhaps DES could give us some perspective on that. So I'll kind of bundle that in. So maybe perhaps a lot of the questions and context that we're looking for perhaps can come from DES and not necessarily individual organizations, much to Lisa's point, saying like, if there is additional information, let me prepare well, but if there isn't, then there isn't, right? Is there anything else that I'm not hearing, or am I mischaracterizing it? Are there questions or pieces of information that need to be brought forth that are more at the organizational level, not the DES level, that need to come forth so people can prepare well for the next meeting?
I think, for me, it's not the number of organizations or what organizations being served. I think for me, it's the amount of money that was spent. I think, Bonnie, a 5-year thing is right. And then how many people did that serve in year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4? I don't, judging whether an agency does a good job or not a good job is really not our role. But, I think that would be helpful, knowing that total number for that amount of money of how many were served.
Okay, I wrote that down. Thank you.
And I don't want to get too far in the weeds, but I'm just curious. we're not a big organization, and I've worked for a lot of rural organizations and one of the major larger organizations, but I'm curious how much of that money through the process ends up in like one particular area, meaning, South Tucson or Catalina or downtown Tucson, just to see if it's spread out across the county.
Okay, I wrote that down. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Tony. Yeah, because that does paint a picture of like regional perspective of how that impact is translated through the dollars. So I appreciate that. All right. I know I don't see any other hands up, but I know there's some people that haven't shared their thoughts or shared any other pieces of information that they think would be helpful, so that we can prepare well. So it sounds like most of the ask is not necessarily at the organizational level, but at the DES level. Is that what I'm hearing? Is that accurate? I see Tony's head nodding, but some cameras are off, so I'm not sure
Yes.
if everyone's in agreement with that or not. Okay. All right. All right. So as a somewhat of a recap, I will ask those questions to DES. We'll see what comes back. Whether we get the answers or not, we're still going to meet another time because we still need to reach some kind of consensus. I heard that if it is on the 21st, that perhaps for the interest of everyone being able to attend, perhaps in the morning, is that what I'm hearing for the 21st? Is that perhaps workable for others that haven't really shared their thoughts on the 21st? Does the morning of the 21st sound workable? Okay, so I will try to solve for some time.
One of
Go
my
ahead.
coworkers might be able to.
What's that?
I don't think I can make it really anytime on the 21st, but I might have a coworker who can join.
Okay, all right. I'll, like I said, those are just that's a tentative date, so I need to go back to the drawing board and see what might make sense. And perhaps I'll throw some proposed dates or times to the group, and we'll see what makes sense. But first things first, I got to look at the calendar and see what can happen relative to those dates and times. So, all right. So I don't think I see any other hands up. I'm going to go ahead and move forward to the next item on the agenda as we begin to wrap things up. So yes. So for item number 6, just as a quick recap before we actually complete item number 6, I will serve up the questions that were communicated that we did a recap on at DES. We'll see what comes back. I will, in the interim, figure out some dates and times for our next meeting, arguably on the 21st, but if there is a potential alternative date, we'll let you know that. And then I'll let people kind of weigh in, and then we will solve for that particular date and time. And of course, the associated agenda, once it's approved, along with the date and time, that will get posted and communicated. So unless there's any other questions, we will go ahead and move with item number 6 on the agenda, which is adjournment. And I really appreciate everyone's investment of time today and all the discussion. So thank you so much for being a part of this subcommittee, and I will reach out to you shortly.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thank